The world carried on like any other day. Sunlight filtered through glass towers, people bustled to work, and the city thrummed with life. Oblivious to the horrors lurking just below its surface, Adrian Mills, a young investigative journalist with an eye for mysteries and a nose for trouble, sipped his coffee, scrolling through his tablet at a corner cafe. His usual cafe companions filled their spots, a mother with her 2 kids, a businessman muttering into his Bluetooth earpiece, a quiet young man with a hood pulled low over his face. Nothing seemed out of place. Then, at 9:47 a.m., the world changed. A sudden hum filled the air, not loud, but enough to make people wince. Adrian looked around, confusion mirrored in every face. Then phones and tablets began to flicker with an eerie green glow, and a high-pitched noise pierced. Adrian's phone was emitting the sound too, and he could feel it vibrating in his pocket, each pulse more urgent than the last. As the signal reached its peak, Adrian noticed the first change. A man in a pressed suit clutched his head, grimacing as veins darkened on his temples, as if something was struggling beneath his skin. He slumped forward, then spasmed upright, his pupils like liquid silver, as his face began to morph, subtly, yet unmistakably. His skin shifted, becoming textured. His fingers elongated slightly, taking on a strange, iridescent hue. Others in the cafe began to experience similar changes. The quiet young man with the hood let out a low groan as his skin rippled, and his arms seemed to stretch, bones reforming as though he were a creature emerging from its disguise. The mother with her kids recoiled in horror as her husband's skin flickered with unnatural patterns, his eyes wide, glowing a faint green. Adrian backed up slowly, heart hammering, unsure if he was hallucinating. Panic erupted. People ran for the exits, trampling over chairs and each other. He bolted toward the door, but a man blocked his way, his once brown eyes, a cold silver now, glaring at him with inhuman intensity. "Run!" the creature hissed, its voice layered with strange, unnatural tones. Adrian stumbled back, chest heaving. He whipped out his phone, recording the chaos in a frenzy. Outside, the world had descended into madness. People staggered along the streets, some completely transformed, others frantically searching for loved ones, the sound of car horns blaring in a cacophony of panic. He felt a hand grab his arm, a woman, her face streaked with tears. She looked human, but her eyes held a secret terror. "You need to find Dr. Lyra Kwan," she whispered urgently, her grip tightening. "She knows what this is. Tell her, they're not all enemies." Before Adrian could question her, she vanished into the panicking crowd, leaving him with only a name and a gnawing sense of dread. Adrian spent hours trying to make sense of what he had seen. His recorded footage was grainy, chaotic, but damning. He watched the video on loop, each frame revealing a piece of a puzzle he couldn't fully comprehend. 10% of the population. Could it be possible? The city lay in a tenuous calm, with news channels scrambling to explain the incidents, calling it a mass psychotic episode. But Adrian knew better. Driven by the woman's words, he searched online for Dr. Lyra Kwan. She was a professor of xenobiology at a local university, renowned for her controversial theories on extraterrestrial life. When Adrian arrived at her office the next morning, he found her disheveled and sleep-deprived, sitting amidst papers filled with complex diagrams and alien-like symbols. She looked up, her gaze intense, as if she already knew why he was there. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked without preamble, her voice heavy with both fear and resolve. "The awakening signal has been activated. I've spent years trying to warn people, trying to tell them that the people walking among U.S. Zooms aren't what they seem." "Who are they?" Adrian asked, struggling to grasp the enormity of the revelation. "They're known as the Zirin," Lyra explained, her hands trembling slightly. "They've been here for centuries, blending in, watching us, studying us. But there's always been a contingency plan. The awakening signal was only supposed to be triggered if..." Her voice trailed off as she glanced out the window, as if expecting something to materialize from the shadows. "If what?" Adrian pressed. She swallowed, her face grave. "If they believed humanity was ready for conquest?" He felt his pulse quicken. "Conquest? They're here to invade us." "Not all of them," she replied, shaking her head. "The Zirin are divided. Some see themselves as guardians, watchers over humanity, allies. But there's a faction that believes in domination, in making Earth a colony. They've been waiting for the right time, and the awakening signal was supposed to be their rallying call. So why now? Adrian's mind was racing, thoughts blurring between fear and disbelief. There must be a catalyst. Something must have triggered it prematurely. But whatever it is, we need to act fast. There's a resistance within the Zarina faction that rejects the invasion. If we can find them, they might help us. Adrian was reeling from this newfound knowledge, but he knew they couldn't waste time. How do we find them? Lyra handed him a small device, a metallic disc that glowed faintly. This is a frequency disruptor. If there's a hidden resistance, they'll be drawn to it. They can sense its signal. We'll start in the old industrial district. They've used it as a hiding place before. Together, they ventured into the heart of the city, moving through back alleys and abandoned buildings, the tension growing with each step. As they approached an old warehouse, Adrian spotted someone familiar, man he'd known from school, someone who should have been an ordinary human. But his eyes glinted silver in the dim light, and his skin held the same subtle shimmer as the others. "Jacob," Adrian called, his voice wavering. The figure turned, his face a mix of shock and relief. "Adrian, I never wanted you to find out this way. But, yes, it's me. We're not all monsters, Adrian. Some of us want peace." Lyra stepped forward, eyeing him cautiously. "If that's true, prove it. Help us stop the invasion." Jacob nodded solemnly. "I can lead you to others, but you'll have to trust me." For Adrian, it was a leap of faith, but he nodded. The time for trust and the fight to protect humanity had begun. The journey into the hidden world of the Zirin resistance felt like descending into another reality. Adrian, Dr. Kwan, and Jacob moved through the abandoned industrial district, navigating dark alleys and stairwells that seemed forgotten by the world above. The old warehouse they entered was damp and cold, the air thick with tension. Inside, small clusters of Zirin aliens huddled together, their features subtly flickering between human and alien forms. They glanced nervously at Adrian and Lyra, not entirely trusting them but following Jacob's lead. A tall, dignified alien stepped forward. His face was aged, with thin streaks of silver beneath his skin, and his eyes gleamed with wisdom and sorrow. He introduced himself as Marius, one of the leaders of the Zirin resistance faction. "Welcome," he said, his voice resonant and calm, though the weight of his words seemed to hold centuries of regret. "We have always hoped that humans would never need to see us like this." Adrian, still grappling with the shock of it all, asked, "If your people want peace, why activate the awakening signal?" Marius sighed, his face shadowed with regret. "The signal wasn't activated by us. The council, the faction that seeks control, initiated it. We had been living peacefully among you, learning your ways, even forming friendships, families. But the council believes it's time for the Zirin to rise and take this world as our own." Lyra, ever the scientist, asked, "And why now? Why would they choose this moment to reveal themselves?" "Humanity is advancing quickly," Marius explained. "You're unlocking technologies, exploring realms of knowledge that could one day threaten Zirin interests. The Council fears that if they don't act now, they may never have another chance." Adrian clenched his fists, anger flaring within him. "So they're just going to enslave us, take over everything we've built?" Marius placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder, his expression somber. "Not if we can stop them. The resistance has long opposed the Council's plans, but we are few, and the Council's reach is vast." The group spent the night strategizing. Adrian, Lyra, and the resistance knew that the awakening signal was the key. If they could shut it down, they could stop the transformation from spreading, preventing more Zirin from revealing themselves and joining the Council's forces. But disabling the signal wouldn't be easy. It was being broadcast from a hidden facility, heavily guarded by the Council's elite warriors. Marius provided them with a map of the facility's location, a nondescript building camouflaged in the city's business district. It was known as the Nexus, a hub that the Council had spent decades constructing in secrecy, filled with cutting-edge Zirin technology. Inside the Nexus, the heart of the awakening signal pulsed, drawing Zirin from across the city to their side. As they prepared to leave, Jacob pulled Adrian aside. "I never wanted this to happen. I thought I could live my life here, with you, with my friends, and keep it all a secret. But the Council is forcing us to choose, and I'm choosing humanity." Adrian nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Then let's save it together." The plan was in motion. They would infiltrate the Nexus the next night, using the Resistance's knowledge and Lyra's scientific expertise to disable the awakening signal. With every step, the bond between Adrian, Lyra, and their unlikely allies grew stronger, fueled by a shared determination to protect Earth from an unimaginable fate. The night was pitch black. The city lights dimmed to a hazy glow as Adrian, Lyra, Jacob, and a small team of Xeran resistance fighters approached the Nexus. The building loomed before them, sleek and unassuming, its facade a perfect mask for the dark purpose it served. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as he looked up at the towering structure. He knew that once they stepped inside, there would be no turning back. They moved through the shadows, bypassing guards and security systems with the help of the Xeran technology Marius had provided. Adrian felt the weight of every step, every heartbeat, one wrong move, and they could alert the Council's forces inside. Inside the Nexus, the air was sterile, almost lifeless, illuminated by a faint, pulsing light that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. Adrian and Lyra exchanged a look before pushing onward. Jacob led the way, his expression tense as he guided them through maze-like corridors. As they reached the heart of the building, they entered a large chamber lined with sleek machines. At its center stood the awakening Signula Massive, humming device emitting a low-frequency pulse that seemed to vibrate through Adrian's bones. Around it were alien guards, their skin shimmering faintly, eyes cold and calculating. Marius' voice crackled over their comms. "Be cautious. The guards are highly trained, and they will not hesitate to kill if they detect intruders." The resistance fighters moved into position, preparing to disable the guards in a silent ambush. But just as they began, a blaring alarm echoed through the chamber. They'd been spotted. Chaos erupted. The guards surged forward, their weapons drawn, moving with terrifying speed. Adrian barely had time to react as one of the aliens lunged at him, its face twisted in a snarl. He dodged, scrambling for cover behind a console as Lyra fired a blaster she'd taken from one of the guards. The room became a blur of flashing lights and pounding footsteps, the tension thick as the two forces clashed. In the middle of the chaos, Adrian spotted the control panel for the awakening signal. He gestured frantically to Lyra, and together they fought their way toward it. Jacob, in his alien form, took on two guards at once, his agility and strength giving him the upper hand. He looked at Adrian nodding, urging him to go. As Adrian reached the control panel, Lyra began working furiously to hack into the system. The device's foreign symbols flashed across the screen as she attempted to override the security protocols. Just as she made headway, a council leader entered the chamber, a towering figure whose presence commanded attention. His face was sharp, calculating, his eyes a piercing silver that seemed to cut through the air. "You think you can stop us?" The leader sneered, his voice laced with disdain. Adrian stepped forward, trying to ignore the fear crawling up his spine. "You won't take this world. Not while there are people like us fighting to protect it." The leader laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Your resistance is pitiful. Humanity will fall, just as countless other worlds have fallen before it. You are but children, playing with forces you cannot hope to understand." But Adrian didn't back down. As the leader advanced, Lyra finished hacking the control panel. With a final, desperate push, she deactivated the signal. The machine's hum faded, the pulsing light dimmed, and a silence fell over the room. The leader roared in rage, charging toward them with inhuman speed. Adrian braced himself, but before the leader could strike, Jacob intercepted him, locking him in a fierce struggle. "Go!" Jacob shouted. "Take Lyra and run." Adrian hesitated, but the look in Jacob's eyes told him everything he needed to know. He grabbed Lyra's hand, and they sprinted toward the exit, leaving the chamber behind. Outside the Nexus, the city lights felt like a strange, comforting presence. The awakening signal had been stopped, and the Xeran, loyal to the Council, were left scrambling without their rallying call. Adrian turned to Lyra, exhausted but hopeful. "It's over, isn't it?" he asked, struggling to catch his breath. Lyra nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "We stopped the signal. We gave humanity a fighting chance." But as they walked into the night, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, a battle for trust, for unity, and for the future of both humans and Xeran. The quiet after their escape from the Nexus was surreal. Adrian and Lyra returned to the warehouse, where Marius and the other Xeran resistance members waited, the weight of Jacob's sacrifice heavy on their hearts. They had stopped the awakening signal, but now humanity knew the truth. Aliens had been living among them all along. The following days were tense as people grappled with the shocking revelation. Streets filled with fearful whispers and confused faces. News stations blared with theories, and the city saw scattered moments of fear, turning to violence as people struggled to accept the Xiran in their midst. Adrian and Lyra, reluctantly thrust into the role of ambassadors, became essential voices in peace negotiations. Their story of what happened at the Nexus, and of Jacob's bravery, brought credibility to their calls for unity. Yet peace remained fragile. Small factions of the Council's loyalists still plotted in the shadows, waiting for the chance to turn the rising tensions into full-scale conflict. One night, Adrian received a message warning him of an attack planned for the upcoming Unity Samhita gathering, where leaders from both sides would formalize an agreement for peace. Determined to prevent more bloodshed, Adrian, Lyra, and Marius quickly mobilized the resistance to track down the Council remnants. They found the Loyalists in a hidden base on the city's outskirts. In a swift and tense showdown, the resistance overpowered the Loyalists, effectively dismantling the last threat to the summit. The Unity Summit proceeded as planned, marking a historic moment of trust between the two species. As Adrian watched the ceremony, he knew the road to unity would be difficult, but hope was beginning to take root. Marius placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder, gratitude in his eyes. "Thanks to you, Marius," said quietly, "we have a chance to live openly, to coexist." Adrian looked toward the horizon, feeling a new sense of purpose. The world was forever changed, but it was a world where humans and Xiran could now walk forward together, facing an uncertain yet hopeful future. And so began a new era, delicate peace born from courage, trust, and the dream of a shared future.